As you know, I recently left my corporate job and I've been in total recovery mode, all about self-care. One of my new routines is the nighttime shower before bed. There's just something about washing away the day and that reflection that's been super helpful for me. I've been using one of our partners, Osea's Mega Moisture Duo. This combo body oil and body lotion are so freaking incredible. It literally feels like I'm at a spa. I realized that the secret is seaweed and other skin level ingredients that are normally reserved for face products. And that's why I was so excited when Osea became one of our partners. And, we're so grateful for partners like this because one, they keep the show going, but they're also super good for all of our listeners and for our own well-being. So if you want to have that nighttime bliss like I am doing, you can get 10% off your first order site-wide with code DATEABLE at oseamalibu.com. You'll get free samples with every order and free shipping on orders over $60. So head to oseamalibu.com and use the code DATEABLE for 10% off. Let us know which products you end up going with. Share them in social. Super excited to see what you end up choosing. I was so excited to get my shipment from Last Bottle Wines in the mail the other day, full of incredible red wines, all from Napa Valley. I love wine tasting, so having this to my door couldn't be happier. Also, couldn't be more excited that today's episode is brought to you by Last Bottle Wines. If you don't know already, they're a Napa-based online wine shop with a twist. They offer just one handpicked wine per day until it sells out, and they're always at incredible prices. We're talking 30 to 70% off retail. And the best part is that there's no subscriptions, no fees, and no minimum purchase. And I could not be more excited to bring this offer right now because they're having a marathon sale, which is coming up March 28th and 29th. Even better, we're offering Dateable listeners 10% off your first order with code DATEABLE. So if you are a wine lover like me, this is a great time to join. And did I mention that shipping is 100% free? So what are you waiting for? Mark your calendar for March 28th and 29th or get on it earlier if you want. You can sign up at lastbottlewines.com and use code DATEABLE and find out why Last Bottle is the most fun way to discover and buy amazing wine.
The Dateable podcast features real stories from real people of how they make modern dating work or not. Each episode will not only offer you a new perspective on dating, but will also change the way you date. I'm your host, Yue, former dating coach turned dating sociologist. You'll also hear commentary from my producer, Julie Krafchick, and other surprise co-hosts. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Dateable, a show all about modern dating. Let's get right to this topic today. Long distance relationships. Some of you have written in to want to talk about this topic. Maybe some of you are in this situation, and we have two live people who are currently in a long distance relationship. We have Sammi and David here. They're currently in a much shorter distance relationship than before. It's Portland to San Francisco, but you used to be London to Portland, which is not that close at all. So just, do you guys want to say a little quick hi?
Hi.
Hi. You're in the same room.
I know.
Yeah.
We're so lucky that we got
So
that.
rare. So rare. So Sammy's the one that lives in San Francisco. She's 29 years old. As of yesterday, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Has been in San Francisco for 10 months, originally from San Diego, but lived in London for many years. And then we have her boyfriend, David. He's 35 years old, lives in Portland, and has been there for almost 30 years on and off. Born in Northern California. Technically, you guys are in a long-distance monogamous relationship together right now, but you started with a long distance between London to Portland, and you were just dating at that point. Do you want to talk about that? How did you first meet?
So I'll give a little synopsis of our first meeting story because I have to do a call out to our long distance heroes who are our friends Sophie and Max, whose wedding we met at. Sophie's one of my best friends. Max is David's best friend from college, and they were actually in a long distance relationship for about 5 years between Montreal and San Francisco. So a pretty big distance. So we met at their wedding. They got married in France, and it wasn't really practical to do, a exclusive, serious relationship relationship at that point. We talked every day, but we only really saw each other every few months. We would go on some crazy trip. We did a road trip around Scotland. It was great. It was an amazing period of our relationship, in air quotes now, since that wasn't necessarily what we were calling that at that point. But we also weren't really experiencing real, again, in air quotes, real life together. We were, it was all like fun adventures, and it was none of the kind of like nitty gritty or the mundanity of
I think of an
everyday.
episode of Bachelor.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is.
That's 100%.
So you guys met at this wedding. Like, what happened then, and like, why even continue talking to each other?
Well, I think it was because my my lines were so great.
Give us some of those lines.
It was the ice cold game, I think, that did it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I believe your opening line was, what would be a good opening line for me to continue talking to you?
That's
It
actually
was-
really endearing.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Although it is a line. It's
Yeah.
a good
Yeah,
line.
totally.
Yeah. It's a meta line.
It's a very meta line.
Yeah.
I don't know how to approach you, so what should I say? That's a great line. So how did things progress after you parted ways?
Well, we started talking pretty quick. I was pretty nervous about getting in touch with Sammi because we really had just met at this thing, although we had mutual, very close friends in common for like a decade before that. Yeah, I was nervous about it, but then thought, okay, yeah, I'll play it cool. I'll be an awesome dude about this. And I lasted like 12 hours or something. And then I found her online. And
Found her online, as
on
like
Facebook.
Facebook. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Right now, we were both on Tinder in the same airport. And just started talking. I mean, for me at least, it was so nice to have somebody to talk to, partly because Sammy's an amazing conversation partner, but partly also because it was like zero stress to it. It was like, here's a person who like owes me nothing, you know, and to whom I owe nothing other than we just know each other good people because of who our friends are. So it was just like zero pressure, all fun.
So was there like a romantic vibe the first time, or was it more like friends that evolved?
No, it was romantic. It was romantic from the get-go.
Define romantic.
Well, I mean, we definitely fooled around at our friend's wedding that we met at. Yes. It was quite romantic. We actually didn't have a room. I was sharing a room with another one of the bridesmaids from the wedding. And our other friends were leaving for the airport at like 6 a.m. And our friends had gotten married in this beautiful, massive country house in the French countryside. And we just sat and talked in a study in this beautiful old French chateau, basically.
Yeah, until the French nobleman who owned it found us there and started yelling in French. And like,
And luckily I speak French, so I could explain what was going on. And I was like, dude, come on.
What
like,
could you possibly explain?
Yeah. I'm like,
I think
French.
the visuals
Yeah.
explain themselves.
I'm like, we're young lovers trying to get to know each other.
We're young
Yeah.
lovers.
He's like, all right, cool. You're good. You're
Yeah.
good. Don't worry about it. Yeah, and then when our friends left at 6 a.m., they were so touched because they thought we had stayed up to see them off. And when they later found out that that wasn't the case, they were a little upset.
like legitimately hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, like, why am I going to stay up till 6 o'clock in the morning to say goodbye
We
to
actually
you?
just want to take over your room
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
check
Yeah.
out. Thanks.
Okay, so you guys met at this wedding, and then David reached out.
Mhm.
What kind of happened from there?
So we started talking on FaceTime pretty much every day, sometimes twice a day. And like David was saying, it was a really nice sort of stress-free person to talk to. He was in the middle of starting his business. I was already super unhappy with my life in London and with my job. And it was nice to have this person who was sort of unaffiliated with all of these other things and all the messy stuff. And as much as you felt like you were getting to know them, didn't really know the other people involved in your life. We were just sort of talking and talking all the time. And one night I was like, hey, I'm going to be a bridesmaid again in a wedding in San Diego. Do you want to come be my date?
Bold.
Yeah. And he was like, don't you think we're rushing into this? You know, this seems a little fast. Maybe we should think about this a little bit. And I believe my exact response was, fuck it, right? And he was like, yeah, okay, you've convinced me.
God, I sound like such a nerd.
Yeah.
That's not at all accurate.
That's what happened.
Okay, what's your perspective?
Sammi told me that she was going to be in California again, but in the context of us talking about people in San Francisco. And she asked if I could get down there pretty easily. And I said, yeah, totally. I have family down here and stuff. And then it like sort of like after we'd had that conversation, it came out that it was in San Diego. And I said, oh, so are you not going to San Francisco now? And she said, oh yeah, I'm also going to San Francisco, but not till I go to LA first. And then so this conversation kind of developed into like, went from let's go on a date together to like, let's go on a 2-week road trip together.
Oh,
And that's the point where I was like, okay, just real quick, is this insane? Yeah,
And then
now
I said,
famous line.
yeah,
fuck it.
Fuck it, right? Which
Right.
he says to me all the time now. And he actually wrote in a note when he sent me flowers the other day after I had a bad day. It just said, fuck it, right? Without his name or anything. And I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Pure
Yeah.
romance in this
Pure
relationship.
romance.
Pure romance.
Yeah. So he agreed to come with me to this wedding and to go on this road trip. And I believe my next response was, cool, I should probably actually ask the bride if it's okay if I bring you, because it was a month and a half maybe before the wedding. Luckily she said yes, so it all worked out.
So when you guys met at this wedding, the first wedding,
Mhm.
what was your situation, your dating situation at that point? Were you seeing people? Were you getting out of something?
Yeah, you go first. I'm gonna let you go first.
Yeah, I had been in a relationship, like a super serious relationship that had ended about a year before, and had been really bummed out about that for the first 6 or 9 months. And after that, I'd been like sort of dating, but not. Yeah, my heart wasn't in it, basically. And the wedding was actually like kind of this intense experience for me. One, it really was like beautiful and romantic and over the top. It was in the French countryside.
How can you not fall?
And it was
in
like
love?
these dear friends of mine, but and like I got really sad for a while because like seeing what they had, that I was, my relationship didn't work out. And then sort of had this big cathartic moment where I thought like, well, here we are, like, let's go have fun. And like, that's immediately the moment where Sammi and I kind of ran into each other. But yeah, up until that point, I'd been just sort of like dating on and off, but not in any way that was real meaningful for me.
Okay.
I kept making out with lesbians. That was a big part of that year for me.
Welcome to life in Portland.
Yeah.
That's why you went long distance. We got to figure it out.
Yeah, I know. I have a hard time explaining that looking back. It was their idea most of the time. I was just like, all right, yeah, okay.
I mean, it just gets more and more romantic. Sammi, I fell in love with you because you're not a lesbian.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. Yeah, it could progress, So kind of similarly, I had gotten out of a 5-year relationship about 6 months before we met. At the time, I had also just been dating casually. I had a probably really terrible idea sort of thing with a guy that I worked with, and it was just it was very much the healing phase post breakup from a long-term relationship. Similarly, also just getting to that moment of feeling like I'm okay and ready to move forward with my life. So it was this weird symbiotic thing that we kind of popped up in each other's lives at exactly the same time.
So
Well,
now
obviously.
let's go to this road trip that happened. You meet up again for the first time. Was this in San Francisco that you met?
In San Diego.
Oh, you met in San Diego first, and then you drove to San Francisco. What was that first meeting like?
Oh, Sammi was so weird about it.
You were weird about
Before we
it.
go, how long after was this wedding from the last wedding?
3 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
so not very long.
Yeah.
No, not too long. No, I mean, we were both, I think,
We were
just
super
a little bit
weird.
shy.
It was really
Super
awkward.
weird.
Yeah, well, because she came to meet me. I had said, I'll just catch a cab to a hotel where everybody in the wedding was staying. And Sammi said she would meet me at the airport. And I like saw her sitting in the terminal. And I walked over thinking I would be like sneaky and surprise her. And I sat down next to her and she just kind of turned and looked at me and she goes, hi.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I had this whole image in my mind of what it was going to be like. And having grown up in San Diego, I thought I had figured out exactly where I needed to sit to be right, perfectly positioned for where he was going to come out of this door, and I was going to stand up and we were going to walk towards each other. And
Slow-mo, wind blowing in your
embrace.
hair.
Exactly. Music softly playing in the background.
Of course.
So when he sat down and I was sort of facing slightly away from him, he was behind me basically. And, he said hi and I turned around and he was sitting there, and it had just sort of blown up this whole image I had in my mind of what our first meeting was going to be like. So it just really caught me off guard and I didn't really know what to do. So I was like, oh, are you hungry? Should we go get breakfast? The traffic's going to be really bad at this time of day, so we should go eat breakfast somewhere nearby and wait it out. That was sort of I just kind of freaked out. Yeah.
So obviously got off to a little bit of a rough
Yeah.
start, but I'm assuming it went pretty well overall.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
By lunch it was
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
by lunch.
I mean, you're talking to two Jews. We measure time by meals, between meals.
I can
Yeah.
attest to that.
Yes.
So obviously you leave this wedding, and then at this point, do you decide like we're dating, or where were you in like your cycle?
I mean, we had like Sammi said, we started talking consistently pretty quick. That didn't much change after California.
Okay.
Other than, we kept talking. I think for me, I was like really excited to confirm that it was a real thing. Part of me was worried that maybe it was like, I had no reason to suspect that anything was off, but it was just like kind of too good to be true at the beginning. And I thought, well, we'll see how it goes down in California. And then it went great.
And when you say you guys were talking all the time, what were you talking about?
What were we talking about?
Was there like future planning? Was there anything about like your feelings for each other?
Yeah, I mean, David does love to talk about his feelings.
Oh, I do remember you telling me this,
I
Sammy.
told you
Yes.
the first
Yeah,
time
I do remember you saying that.
I am crazy for a processing session. I just,
Me too.
We do have a live studio audience supporting this lovely couple.
Yeah, that's been interesting for me, having only ever dated English guys in the past. All of those stereotypes are very true. So being with a guy who likes talking about his feelings is,
yeah, best coast.
yeah,
Just all feelings all the time.
refreshing
Especially
and terrifying.
Portland, too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
Portland,
feelings
San
over
Francisco, yep, for
Portland.
sure.
We only really started talking about future plans after that trip to California. Was it on that trip that someone had given you advice, if you really like her, make sure you know when you're going to see each other again, as like the advice for long distance relationships?
Okay.
Which I will attest to. And we have had moments over the course of the last year and a half where we have left each other and not known. And it's a really terrible feeling. It's a super sad, uncomfortable feeling.
Definitely see that, like knowing the plan. So I guess what was your next plan after California?
Well, a big thing that happened during that trip, as we said before, ended in San Francisco. And during that trip, I decided to move to San Francisco from London. So that really shifted my kind of life plans in a really big way, where I was getting ready to quit my job and pack up all my stuff and move back. There was one trip that I really wanted to do before I left that I had always wanted to do, which was a road trip through Scotland. So we made a plan to meet in New York for a week right after New Year's.
Yeah.
And then we flew back to London together, and he stayed with me in London for the last 2 weeks that I was working at my last job, right?
You're basically the highest stress possible time to parachute to like.
It was not great.
So how many months after the road trip was this that you guys saw each other?
It was another 3 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like every 3 months you were seeing
Yeah,
each
we got
other.
into this 3-month
That's
cycle.
a very good cadence.
Yeah.
For that distance, I mean, that's a pretty big distance.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've always been really lucky in the fact that because David works for himself, he has a lot of flexibility. So that's been a big help. And I know a lot of people don't have that. And I think we're really lucky to have that. But yeah, so he came to London for about 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of my job, when I was saying goodbye to, you know, all of my friends from high school and college, because I went to high school and college in the UK. And it was a very stressful, emotional time, which was a little bit difficult and obviously felt like kind of high stakes because we were just at the beginning of building something. And then we went on this trip to Scotland, and like within the first 2 days just hated each other and like almost left.
Yeah, no, it was real. And there was like,
What?
not only
Yeah.
was all that stuff going on in Sammy's life, but there was stuff going on in my life
Yeah.
too. Like just like finalizing, having like the sort of final round of saying goodbye with that ex that I had before.
So
And
that was still kind of lingering.
well, we weren't like dating anymore, but we were just still in communication, just like sorting everything out.
Closure.
Yeah, and so like all of that came down, Sammy's decision to move and me wrapping up that chapter of my life and all of it like at the end of that December, and then we were hanging out all of a sudden, and it was tough for
Yeah.
both of us.
It's
Yeah.
kind of a lot going from
Yeah.
0 to 60 like
Yeah.
that.
Right, because
Yeah.
you were like, I'm assuming you were like, kind of living together, like when you were there. So it's like, you
Yeah.
never see someone, and then you're like sharing every space with them.
For a month.
Right.
We spent the whole month of
Wow.
January together. So by
Which
the
was
time,
our third date.
Which was our third date. That's what we call our third date. Yes.
That's a pretty epic third date.
January 2018 was our third date.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned on the road trip you decided to move to San Francisco. Was David like a factor? Like, what was your thought process?
So, I actually wrote David a letter before I left London. I'm trying to remember my phrasing because obviously when we write, we are so much more eloquent than when we speak. But essentially,
I remember your phrasing.
Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I remember it. Yeah,
ahead.
you said, no matter what happens between us, talking to you has helped me come back to myself and realize that I want to be back in California. So, yeah, I don't know if I get full credit for getting her back here, but like, there's like,
But you also don't want full credit.
No,
That's
right.
a lot
No,
of
no,
responsibility.
Because then
on
if
your
it goes
end.
wrong,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was more like you wanted this life shift for yourself, and it was like an added benefit that you guys would be a lot closer to each other.
Yes. Yes.
For those months leading up to this Scotland trip, were you seeing anybody else?
No, actually, right before the trip to California, I had completely cut off any situations with anybody else.
And was that intentional?
Yes, that was very intentional.
So you said in your head, you thought, I am in a monogamous thing with David.
Yeah, it was more, I just wasn't interested in anybody else at that point, which I guess is the point at which monogamy kind of happens.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily like we'd had a conversation. I didn't feel like he owed that to me in return. I just felt like I wasn't interested in spending time with anybody else. I wasn't feeling attracted to anybody else. And I was just sort of looking forward to seeing him again.
And David, what was your situation?
Yeah, it's funny. Like Sammi actually, because I think you were the one who sort of outlined that was the understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I had gotten stressed about just the idea of like, are we doing this or are we not doing this? And I remember calling you and you saying like, look, dude.
Fuck it, we're doing it.
Yeah, but not exactly though. I mean, it was like, yeah, let's see where this goes. And she's like, I don't really care what you're up to. Don't do anything stupid or mean. And I'll do the same. And like, we're square here. We don't have to have every last little conversation to be okay between each other as long as we can trust each other. So yeah, like I was still sort of like, I don't know. I think there were probably a couple more making out with lesbians on dance floors or something. Like, but by the time
That will never stop in Portland.
yeah, but like, I hope not. Me then for the community.
For the community.
Yeah.
I feel like it's worth mentioning that we, as individuals and as a couple for a long time, not anymore, but we have this delineation of dance floor makeouts as people who both really love dancing and get really into it, where we don't really count dance floor makeouts as like of the same weight or meaning as non-dance floor
Yeah,
makeouts.
it's
Like if you're gonna be on the dance floor, you're gonna make out. I mean, that's just comes
you
with
wouldn't
the
count that as
territory.
cheating.
if you're doing it right.
Yeah, that was the last thing for us to give up was dance floor makeouts.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
so you were like, okay, if you make out, that's one thing, but dance floor make out is
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like David has become like the checkpoint for lesbians on the dance floor.
Yeah.
They're just like the annual check of am I still a lesbian?
Yeah.
You know? I think it's like a makeout session.
Still a lesbian.
Yep, still a lesbian.
Yep,
Thanks, David.
confirmed.
It's a really important public
This is,
I'm
service.
really
this is
glad
an
to be the
important role that you
fail-safe.
cannot give up no matter what.
You are a huge contributor.
No, you know what? I passed
to
the
your-
torch now, and I'm sure
To
there's
your
some
community.
other guy out there convincing women that they still don't like
You
men.
have
but-
Sammi,
So-
you were the one to let that lucky guy step up. So, okay, while you were in London and
Yeah.
you were in Portland, how did you deal, just like logistically, how did you deal with the time zone differences?
Such
I
a
know.
nightmare.
Oh, that was the worst.
That's brutal.
That was the absolute worst part.
I mean, it really does help
Yeah.
for me to be self-employed because it meant that
Yeah.
like a lot of
Yeah.
times we could talk when she got off work and it was like 10 in the morning my time. I was available to talk for.
Oh, see,
Yeah.
that's not bad for you. Yeah.
No. I remember Sammi complaining though because she would often talk to me like at the end of the night and she'd be like tired
Yeah.
or like had to
Yeah.
deal with shit all day or whatever it was.
Difference
Whereas
in energy.
right. And I'd be like, hey!
I'm awake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did the long distance for 6 weeks, so not nearly as long as you guys did, but through the London time zone. And I think what I found helped was scheduling in advance, knowing that like things could change, but at least having that date again. Did you guys have any like coordination that way, or how did you handle things, or just call whenever?
Yeah, we did definitely do some scheduling because I remember missing calls that we had scheduled a couple of times, which, you know, very rightly hurt his feelings a lot. Might describe myself as frazzled. As a bit of a frazzled, chaotic person. I think you would probably agree with that. So sometimes I just get like caught up in what's going on, and to me, it didn't carry quite the same weight that it did with him. Not that talking to him wasn't meaningful and important, but it was just sort of like, well, if we're not going to talk right now, surely we can talk in a couple of hours. But just sort of like honoring those commitments and honoring those times, it became clear was really important. So I stopped missing scheduled
So
calls.
how did you
Yeah.
communicate that, David?
I mean, I think it took me a while to figure out what was going on. I sort of like knew intellectually that was a sort of sore point for me, but hadn't really like had to figure that out because, like I said, I mostly wasn't dating at all. When I was, it was just like, so like, I don't know, I'll see you when I see you. Like nobody was investing in
Yeah.
anybody. So I kind of didn't understand it until I went through it with Sammi. And to her credit, like once I was able to explain it clearly, she was like super solid about it. But it took me a while to even understand why I was getting so upset
Yeah.
about it. And it was just like, oh yeah, because I've had some unreliable people in my life.
Right.
And I was worried that this would turn out to be that, and it hypersensitive to it, you know? So like even a little bit of evidence in that direction, I was like, oh, everything is doomed.
Even when you're like in the same city as someone and you're away from them, you start to have your mind wander. So I'm thinking about like being in a totally different time zone, a different like environment completely, where you really have no idea like what their life is and like how you dealt with that. I guess like from your perspective, like did that come up? Like how did you kind of manage having like separate lives and then also bringing them together?
The time zone made it weird too, right? Because I would talk to Sammi in the evening, but she would talk to me in the morning.
Right.
So like, I think at first I would, like if I wasn't talking to you, I'd be like, she's probably out on a date, and then I'd feel bad about it. And later I was like, no, I talked to her at the end of pretty much every night.
Yeah.
I don't know if those kind of things crossed your mind.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But also, I was like asleep when it was your nighttime. And so if I woke up and I didn't have text from you or something, I might think...
Another lesbian on the dance floor.
Just everywhere in Portland.
Such a magnet.
Trying to make out with my boyfriend. Oh, but you weren't my boyfriend then, so it was okay.
And in dance floor makeouts were okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually been really beneficial about being in a long distance relationship, because you are forced to trust that person in a way that you might not be forced to trust them when there's really close proximity. In terms of leading separate lives and kind of bringing those together, definitely when we first started dating, it was interesting because, you know, usually when you date someone, they start meeting your friends. So when they talk about things that are happening and people and stuff, you have an idea of who they're talking about. And realistically, like, you just have no fucking idea who they're talking about for a really long time. And you kind of just have to humor them and try to piece it together.
Yeah.
And it's like a test of how much you care about that person, that you're willing to sit and listen to them talk about, you know, people who you don't know and you've never met. And at this point, like, besides your attachment to that person, have no reason to care about. They're essentially a fictional character as far as you're concerned at that point. We've been quite lucky because my group of friends in San Francisco is David's group of friends in San Francisco.
Right. Okay.
So there was no necessity to introduce him to people, to worry about if he was going to get along with people. You know, in that sense, it was super seamless. And then I feel quite lucky that his close group of friends in Portland are just an incredible group of people who I've gotten along with really well. Some of whom have come to visit me without him.
I was going to ask you, like, how did things shift? Like, I know you're still long distance, Portland to San Francisco, but clearly that's a very different distance than Portland to London. How have things changed in terms of long distance, and how have they stayed the same?
We see each other a lot more.
How often?
So we have a new rule. The longest we went recently was right before mid-December. We went 6 weeks without seeing each other.
Okay.
And that was, we decided,
It was
too long.
not having it.
Yeah, we were like, nope, not doing that again.
Yeah.
It seems to work out to about a week a month right now.
Yeah, so we're trying not to go any longer than 3 weeks without seeing each other.
And then when you do see each other, it's for a full week.
Typically, I mean, sometimes Sammi can just sneak up for a weekend. But for me to come down here, may as well stick around. Like, I can work down here.
And do you take turns visiting each city?
Not one-to-one, but yeah.
Yeah. One thing that we talked about in the very beginning was that we weren't going to keep score. It wasn't going to be, because you can kind of weaponize that and say, well, I visited you last time, so you better come and visit me, blah, blah. I mean, that's just not, I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's fair.
And we're in different circumstances too, right?
Totally
Like I have all this free time that I can be flexible with. But Sammi makes way more money than I do. The considerations are different.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we decided was, whichever one of us is able and willing to do it at any given time will be the one that does it. So what usually happens is I tend to go up there slightly more frequently, but for shorter trips. So I'll go up once or twice a month for a weekend, and David will come down here slightly less frequently. But for example, right now he's here for 2.5 weeks.
That's a long time.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lucky guy when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
And I have other work down here, and I have friends and family down here. If Sammi needs a night to herself, like tomorrow night, for example,
Because you're basically living together when you're here.
Right.
So it's like you go from not being together to being like really together.
It's a drastic difference.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And I tend to be the type of person who's hyper social. Also, my job is just talking to people constantly. I do user research. So my whole job is just like interviewing people and, you know, advocating for research and being in meetings and talking and expending a ton of energy. Sometimes when I get home at the end of the day, I don't want to do
Don't
those
want to
things.
open your mouth at all.
So we've gotten really good though about being able to say, like, I love you. And
Go away.
You
Love you, go away.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Yeah,
You're like,
please.
I'm finally seeing you, but please go away.
Yeah, just for like 3 hours, and then I'll start missing you intensely and text you annoyingly, being like, when are you coming home?
The frequency
Yeah.
in which you see each other,
Mhm.
even being long distance, is probably more frequent than most people who are dating each other in San Francisco.
Well, I think the intensity too, because
The
you're like
intensity.
basically living together and spending all this time together.
But the kind of the norm these days of going on dates is you see each other at most once a week and
Yeah.
maybe once every other week. It could be not long distance,
Mhm.
but they see each other actually less than you guys
Yeah,
do.
but not usually, because you guys are what, year and a half? How long have you guys been officially dating?
Since end of May, beginning
Yeah.
of June of
So, like,
2018.
That was like the last, like, here's what we're doing, State of the Union.
So like,
yeah, you really put your foot down.
Well,
Tell us about this.
I went up to Portland, and again, I'm just gonna blame a lot of stuff on living in the UK for a long time. We were sitting on your couch in your apartment downtown, and you basically said, are you my girlfriend? Are you going to be my girlfriend? And I got super uncomfortable and embarrassed and started sliding down the couch, and my face went really red. And I think I joked around. I was like, oh, are we going steady now? And you got very serious. I
Why
made
is
it
this?
clear.
Why is this such an uncomfortable conversation for you, Sammy?
It's not necessarily that conversation specifically. It's more just the open, honest, like, these are my feelings. What are your feelings? That's not something that I experienced a lot over the 12
British
years.
men are like, let's just drink. Yeah.
Or even like all of my close friends. I often have to shake them and just be like, tell me what you're actually feeling. So that has been a real cultural adjustment for me coming back to California. And maybe I lean on that a little bit too much as a crutch to explain my behavior.
What was it, like a year before this? So you had already been like talking and seeing each other for that year. And then this point, you put your foot down, David.
Yeah, I guess I felt like that we were getting to a place where it was possible to invest a lot of time and energy and to and like sort of, do it on purpose instead of just like when it happened or when it was fun or something. And I was like, but I don't want to do that if I feel like in a day of the week, Sammy could evaporate.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because this is when Sammy had moved to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Do you think the fact that you knew that she was moving to San Francisco and the fact that you knew you were moving changed the way the relationship progressed?
For sure.
Yeah.
Like it had an end goal in mind.
Yeah.
What is the end goal here? Have you guys talked about? Is this going to be a long distance for a long time, or is there an expiration date?
It's time to take a quick break and tell you about our coaching special. Just in time for summer romance, we're offering a special on half-hour coaching sessions with a Dateable team. For the entire month of June, a 30-minute coaching session with either me or Julie will only be $50, regularly priced at $75. Just head to dateablepodcast.com/coaching and look for the summer special. Now back to the show.
What is the end goal here? Have you guys talked about? Is this going to be a long distance for a long time, or is there an expiration date?
So our plan for 2019 was to make plans.
Okay.
We're fans of...
Me too.
Yeah, we're fans of like the meta, the meta lines, the meta plans.
It's a good plan for everyone. Just
Yeah,
make
yeah.
plans.
Make plans.
So right, yeah, make plans, everyone. Right now, the actual plan that we have made is that David's going to come and spend a more extended period of time here over the summer, about 2 months. And that's not necessarily a, can we do it? Because we feel fairly confident at this point we can. It's more just our lives are both kind of coming to a series of crossroads, and there's a few different decisions we could make. They would affect our own lives and each other and our relationship very differently. And they're going to kind of be coming to a head at that point. So I think it's more just giving us the time and proximity to work through that together and make some big decisions together.
And what are some of these big decisions?
So where we'll be living. So I personally would love to eventually move into a professional situation where I can have a lot more freedom and flexibility, like David does. I keep wanting to call you Dave.
I mean, you get to call me Dave.
Okay.
Yeah, this is everybody else.
We have to
Okay,
call you
sorry.
David.
You and my uncles.
I love special treatment. So yeah, I would love to be in a position, more like the position that he's in, where he can travel around. He can go to New York for a couple of weeks. There are certain commitments and responsibilities that you have to be in Portland for on a regular basis. But outside of those, you have this like great ability to kind of move around and be where you want to be. And in my mind, we would have a home base that would very likely be Portland because it's so much cheaper than San Francisco. And I also really love it there. And I don't mind the rain because, again, England.
So the plan is ultimately move to Portland.
Probably. What do you think the plan is?
The plan is to have a plan,
Let's
right?
talk about this. What do you think the plan is?
Are we having a real conversation right now? Like a live conversation with this couple. Let's just listen in.
Yeah. There's stakes on the table.
Ooh.
It's not just like making a plan to make a plan. It's like this needs to be a conversation between us. There's some things that we're pretty clearly totally aligned on. There's other things where it's like, well, we're not really sure. And where we want to live in 6 months or a year or 10 years is definitely in the not really sure category. I'm not really worried about it. I'm just tired of not living in the same city as Sammi.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the extent of my feelings.
I guess like what is the end point like of long distance? Do you think like not knowing what that end point is sustainable, or like what advice would you give to people in this situation?
I don't think it's a good idea to force an endpoint if one doesn't come about naturally. Neither one of you should feel like you're having to make a big compromise or sacrifice to fit that other person into your life. I think having it be a sort of ongoing conversation has been really helpful. And it's more just understanding that you're both on the same page, that you want to work towards being in the same place as each other at some point, whenever that point kind of aligns for both of you. And that's going to be as sort of equal as it possibly can be. And sometimes maybe, I've been talking about applying to PhD programs, and a part of that conversation is, what cities would work for you. I'm not saying I'm going to choose my PhD program based on a list of cities that you give me, but it might affect the programs I apply to. If I'm choosing between two sort of equally ranked programs in terms of my interest, and one is in a city that you would like to live in or prefer to live in, then I'll choose that one. And maybe you'll make that sacrifice for me for 5 years. Sorry. And then I can pay that back to you in some way. I don't know. I think it's a moving target, and it's about having a conversation and not kind of keeping score and making sure that you're coming to that decision and coming to that endpoint and end goal together. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds right to me, for sure. I mean, of course it does, right? Like we've been working on this theory for a while together.
Yeah.
But the only thing I'd add is like, if you'd asked me a year ago, I wasn't so attached to the notion of being in the same city as you, right? Because we weren't as far along. Like it wasn't like we had a bad then and we have a good now. You know what I mean? It was like that's what made sense then.
Right.
And it was super exciting to get to travel and see you. And it was like felt just fine to be able to focus on my own life in Portland, when you weren't there. I still missed you, but like it was just a different balance at the time. Yeah, we do talk about the model of just like having it be a conversation, because it does shift over time, and that's fine. I can imagine folks for whom maybe they stay in that spot for a really long time of being comfortable in different cities. Maybe they both have kids or something.
Right. Well, that's not a good point though. Like I feel like being in limbo when you're in a long distance relationship is probably a very dangerous point, because you end up having these separate lives that you're so comfortable with, and even though you're in a relationship, you have no joint life together.
I think what David's saying, if I'm getting this right, is like if that's where you are and you guys are both on the same page, that you are enjoying your lives and also enjoying the time together, it could work. But if one person is like, I want to be like all in with this person, see them every day and all of that, that's when you get into like more of a limbo.
So you kind of have to be on the same page.
Yeah.
But I know a couple, they were married, then they were long distance. And when they first became long distance, it was purely for financial reasons. The husband found a better job in California and she stayed in Colorado. So they said, well, this is better for our finances. Let's just keep it long distance for now until I'm able to find a job in California. 7 years go by. Okay.
Wow.
He went from job to job to job, couldn't find anything that was super stable, but loved his life in California. And she has a really big network in Colorado. Her mom is there with her, so she's happy where she is. 7 years has gone by. There is absolutely no endpoint. They're married and they're both perfectly happy living separate lives. So then what's the point of being in a relationship at that point,
I guess you
right?
still have that compatibility in that person.
There's a thing that David used to say to me, and still probably says to me sometimes, but less now because we're becoming more conventional. He always used to say, instead of failing at something old, let's try to succeed at something new. Like, why do those have to be the parameters of a relationship? Is being in a relationship defined by living in the same place, sharing the same space? Is that really a necessity? And if a different setup is working for two people, for both of them equally equally
True.
and they're
Yeah.
both happy. I would argue that that's actually the point of being in a relationship, is having somebody who loves you and supports you and who makes you happy no matter what the actual circumstances are.
So can I add one question that I've been
Yes.
dying to know?
Oh.
Because I feel like that's all great, right? But then there's
That's great,
the
but
physical side, right?
Mm.
Because I have my own opinion of this, but like I had my very brief long distance. It felt like we were like becoming just friends. And then there was a turning point, but I would love to hear what your turning points have been and ways that you've been able to kind of keep the spark alive despite not being able
sex.
to...
Well, what do you do about
not
that?
even just
Intimacy,
just
just
like
sex.
even
like,
physical touch, because
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like there's so much about a relationship of
Cuddling.
intimacy that like you get from being physically with that person.
Yeah, that was hard to get used to.
Yeah.
For me, that was
Yeah.
really like, I feel like at this point, as the gaps between seeing each other have shortened, it's like less rough. But just like you're saying, yeah, even just holding hands is meaningful, much less having sex. I don't know. I never have had a hard time keeping the spark alive for you.
We definitely have moments when we're apart for a while where you're looking at this person on FaceTime and there is like a physical aching where you're like, oh God, I just wish you were laying next to me so I could like put my hand on your chest or
right.
not even anything necessarily overtly sexual. Yeah, we've never had an issue keeping the spark alive. We don't necessarily partake in phone sex. We have a couple times. It's not something that is like very regular for us.
I'm too goofy for you.
Too goofy.
I make such a fucking joke out of it. And
He
you're
does.
just like, all right, I can't.
Well,
I
that's
cannot
why
with
we
this.
reverted to something else, which I
Oh.
would highly recommend, which we call naked miming. So,
Oh, get ready for this.
Oh, yeah.
Taking notes.
Uh-huh.
yeah. So because we're both probably too goofy for like FaceTime sex. Well,
So just don't talk.
so
No, much stupider. Get ready.
you got to start by being on FaceTime and shocker, both being naked. And you take turns giving the other person something to mime. So the person has to like
But
get
like not sexy
but
things.
like not sexy things. No, it's like you're walking down the street and you turn to your left and all of a sudden you see a truck barreling towards you and you're terrified and that person has to like get out of bed and
Oh my
naked mime
God.
that scene.
Have you ever had anyone walk in on you doing this? Because that would be amazing.
Luckily, I live alone.
Oh, and my roommates are terrified of coming into my room
Yeah.
unannounced.
This is
room.
what's keeping the spark
No,
alive.
this
I
is-
mean,
no.
this whole time we thought it would be something else. I was thinking like one of those like
Sexting.
remote vibrators,
Yeah.
maybe. But
Yeah.
no, naked
No.
miming.
That's
No,
Apparently.
it's
it.
just-
That's the key to a long-term relationship.
Yeah, this is what us failing at the other stuff devolved into. It was just like, all right, well,
I don't think we're cool enough for phone sex.
I think I'm.
But why do you? But why do you have to be naked for this?
Because it's so much funnier. It's so much funnier.
This has
that
happened
way.
twice total. for
It's
the
happened
record.
Okay,
like
so this
it's
isn't like
happened
a
4
regular-
times. It's happened like 4 times.
And is this something like you intentionally say, like, okay, now it's 7 o'clock, we're gonna do some naked miming, or
It's just if
is
the
it-
stars align, if we're both naked, which is, happens regularly if we're both going to bed. Because despite living in places that have earthquakes, we both sleep naked, which is probably not totally wise.
Got it.
And
You can't let the earthquakes win.
true.
So you're like, you happen to be naked already.
Yeah, and you're feeling a little goofy, and it's like, hey, show me.
Basketball player drives tank.
These are like
God.
scenarios.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
I
guys
feel
have
like,
thought this out. Is there like an online site?
I'm like,
that-
I thought it was like mime a panda.
Yeah.
No, it's like a panda eating a leaf while taking a dump.
So
I
have
mean,
you
it's
ever-
like
Yeah,
stuff- yeah.
That's a good one.
You
That's
got
a
it.
good one.
Try that
Really
one.
gets
So
my
have you
motor
guys like
running.
ever sexting like dirty text or no?
Some.
Yeah,
Some.
you do more than I do.
Yeah.
And usually I'm at work and I'm like, you have to stop. I love you. I just opened iMessenger on my laptop in a meeting room with
Oh,
my
and
background.
I've had that happen too, where I get ones from you and I open it like in a coffee shop and I'm just
Oh yeah.
Damn,
yeah.
we do pictures.
Oh, you
Oh,
do
okay.
pictures.
Okay.
That's trust.
See, yeah.
Yeah.
See, keep the spark alive that
Yeah.
way.
You gotta Snapchat
Do you guys
that.
use did you guys use WhatsApp a lot when you were abroad, or
Yep.
was it
Yes.
mostly FaceTime?
Yeah, we had a sort of evolution from Facebook Messenger to WhatsApp to then iMessenger when I got a US number. That was our sort of chat evolution. But we realized we'd been talking on Facebook Messenger for so long when we realized one day that we could be WhatsApping this whole time. And I think there was like a weird intimacy to that even, because it was like, oh, we have to exchange phone numbers. No, we would have, because we were video chatting through Facebook Messenger for a while too.
Well, that's the nice part about technology is it has made like long distance a lot easier.
A lot more doable.
A lot more doable.
But even with that, so we've been hearing a lot of highlights of your long distance relationship. What about some of the lowlights? Were there any points in this relationship where you thought, I'm giving up, I can't do this anymore?
When we were in New York and we were both like pretty stressed out, there were a couple times where I was like, man, I'm not sure. It wasn't like I'm out of here, but it was like, geez, I don't know, you know.
But that's when you were together.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it was it was feelings from having been apart, really. You know, it was like not knowing how to be together yet. Yeah. I don't know, like sometimes it's been, when we've been apart for over a month, sometimes it's frustrating, but I never felt like I don't want to see Sammy, and I just felt like, God, get this over with. You know?
Yeah.
I think that's totally true. I've never had that feeling when we've been apart. You know, we mentioned before that when we were in New York and then London, the trip when we were in like New York, London, Scotland, there was just a big buildup of a lot of really stressful things happening in both of our lives.
And we weren't good at talking about it yet.
Yeah, we weren't really equipped. If anything, we weren't really equipped for being together at that point, physically in the same space together at that point, which is why, you know, 2 days into this 2-week road trip in Scotland, we were in St. Andrews and we just had, you know, all of this stuff that had been building up in New York. You know, we weren't very happy. And then in London, I was distracted and stressed and he was distracted and stressed. And, you know, we got to Scotland and we were staying with my friend's mom. So we were, you know, on our best behavior, but not really feeling very intimate with each other. And then by the time we got to St. Andrews, it just sort of all kind of blew up in our faces. And there was a moment where we were both just like, I don't know if I can do the rest of this trip with you.
Wow.
And we ended up just having a really, really long, really honest conversation about everything that was going on and everything that had led to that and ways that we had been communicating with each other, or probably in my case, hadn't been communicating with each other. And then we ended up having the most incredible 2 weeks together after that, after all that stuff was kind of aired. But I think for us, it's always been trying to get used to being together at different points as we've been learning how to communicate with each other and what the other person will respond to and expect from us. And
we're super different in how we...
That's any relationship,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So what is some advice you would give to people? Let's say I struggle with this learning how to be together because... Like, for example, my boyfriend and I see each other only on weekends. So we have a whole week of not seeing each other. And when we do see each other, it's sort of shocking to me in a way. I have to like ease my way into it because I'm not like used to having someone with me. What's some advice you give to couples just trying to ease their way into being together and learning how to be together?
One thing that's been really big for me that I think was a huge adjustment for us was feeling okay with having time together be kind of mundane and boring. And it's something that I brought up with David before because I would get the feeling that he wanted everything to be special and magical and romantic. And, you know, life can't always be that way. And my point to him has always been, whether or not he actually thinks that, and we'll let him speak to that. But my point to him has always been, you know, we have to be okay with the mundanity of day-to-day life. We have to be okay with the fact that sometimes we'll be in bad moods around each other. Sometimes one of us is going to want to do things and the other one isn't. And it's okay if we go our separate ways for an evening, or it's okay if we just want to sit on the couch and watch movies and actually not talk to each other. You know, we're not wasting time together. We're just spending a different kind of time together.
I could totally see that because you're like, every minute's precious because I'm not always with you. So like, how do we maximize it? But that's just not the way life is.
It's not
all
sustainable.
The time.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, if you're someone like me who kind of operates on these highs and lows of expending a lot of energy and then really needing to recharge, if I don't get that recharge time, I turn into what I might describe as a monster. And rather than kind of pushing myself and then becoming aggravated and irritable, just being able to say, like, it took a while for us to get to that point of me being able to communicate to him that I needed that time in that space. So I think it's just sort of being comfortable with the boring and the mundane, being honest with your partner when you do see them, if you're not maybe feeling as excited as you feel like you should, and having that be okay. And I think it's always going to be a little weird. I don't think there's any getting around that. There's always going to be that little jolt.
Transition period.
Yeah. And I think that's okay too. All of these things are just a part of life and a part of trying to build a relationship with someone. And it's probably good that you feel a little weird because you're excited and you have so much you want to say and so much you want to do, and it's hard to kind of temper that energy and that like jolt at first. But yeah.
David,
what about you?
I'm hesitant to give advice because I feel like most of our successes have come from just winging it anyway.
That's very
That's
true.
the best.
trial and error, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the best advice I could give is just if it's working on your terms, that's great. The trick is just to like actually figure out what that is. You know, I think like prior to
That's
you
great
moving
advice.
to San Francisco, I had it wrapped up this whole thing in my head about what it means for David that Sammi is moving to San Francisco. And that caused some issues for you, also for me, like internally between us, because it was like not connected to reality, not connected, but like once we sort of got past that and figured out the project we were actually working on, not just sort of like some notion of what we're calling the relationship or something. And it was like, well, it'll sort itself out, I'm fortunate in that Sammi is pretty good at being like, no to this, yes to that, whatever. And so that makes it pretty clear for me.
Very decisive.
Yeah.
That's good. Great trait.
So I guess, were there any moments that you were like, why am I doing this? Like, could be easier to have a relationship with someone that's in my own city. Like, what kept you guys going with this?
It was awesome for me how far away you were at the beginning.
Yeah.
It was, because I was like, I was so like safe and it was so fun and like, what's the worst that could happen?
So it's where
like,
you were at
this
that
is just
moment.
like rad. Yeah, like there's a beautiful, intelligent woman who lives on the other side of a fucking ocean. Like, this is a dream come true.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
I think it's really important to take into consideration that we were both coming out of really intense, really long-term relationships. And actually for us, we've lucked into this weird kind of like dipping our toes in situation where we started out super far away and then we became closer and cared about each other more, and the distance lessened, and it allowed us to kind of build up to that and build that sort of need for each other and that trust in each other, and it's kind of mirrored our healing. That's so cheesy.
No, that's
but
true, though.
it's mirrored our healing in a lot of ways, and I think it was the best possible scenario for us given the circumstances. I don't think we could have handled that kind of intensity with somebody who lived down the road.
No, because just like you're talking about, most folks when they're dating might not see each other as much as Sammi and I do. We're the people who tend to dial things up to 11.
We're going to see each other every day.
Right. Like whatever it may be. And so
no matter what.
Yeah, it's just so like but we but the circumstances didn't allow for that. And so
it kind of forced you to take it slower, and it kind of let you just gradually, organically develop something, opposed to like have the pressure to be like in a relationship, be serious, all of that immediately.
Yeah. It allowed us to build something really different. And let's keep in mind that taking things slower consisted of our second date being a 2-week road trip and our third date being spending an entire month together.
Right, but imagine if you met and you were both in the same city.
I mean, it probably would have blown up in our faces really quickly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And you were talking before about like the sort of things you learn from being in long distance relationships, and I think that was great for me, to have to actually like sit there and experience my feelings instead of just like unloading them on you. There's time and a place for that.
I think sometimes we replace feelings with affection or physical touch, and we feel like as long as I'm touching my partner, we don't need to be talking about feelings. So when you are long distance,
that doesn't sound like me. I can see you thinking that, whereas I would be like, oh no, enough of this.
I think you're
smooching.
You're equal parts touching and talking.
Yeah.
Long distance and right next to each other.
Yeah.
So this is a good segue. Let's talk about some takeaways of this conversation. A lot of good stuff here.
I used to think, because I've had a few very short-lived long-distance relationships that lasted maybe 3 or 4 months. And my biggest gripe was we never had an end date. I always thought with long-distance relationships, that's what you need. You need like this end date expiration. When are you going to be together? But what I'm hearing from you guys is what you really need to be working on is working towards a goal together. And that goal could be totally different. And the goal for you guys is to see each other more and be in the same city at some point, but also keep working on this relationship at the same time. So 2 people just need to be on the same page.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a forced end date.
Yeah.
The other takeaway I have is, and I've heard this from other couples too, is when you want to maximize time as a couple, you tend to schedule things back to back to back because you're like, we got to experience this and this and this. It's not just long distance, but even for couples going on vacation, it's so necessary to schedule some downtime.
Yeah.
So I've had couples tell me like, we schedule time just to just read or sit by the pool, or I go shopping and he does something else. So scheduling that like normal time
Yeah.
is actually just as important as scheduling all the adventures that you have.
That's a really good point.
One really quick actionable piece of advice that I will give speaking of scheduling is we have a joint calendar and that is so useful. And we do actually, and by we, I mean usually Dave.
I love a Google Calendar.
I know. And it,
Love a Google
Get that
honestly,
shit so color coded, and all my notifications are. Oh God, it's satisfying.
beautiful.
It genuinely makes me so attracted to you. And I remember, I remember the day you made it. I was like beside myself. It was a real.
Was this like a naked Google Calendar making session?
There was
Like,
nothing
like,
sexual about it whatsoever.
naked.
This is a
meme. This is a meme. That should happen.
There's a pretty good chance I was naked.
So we do, yeah, that's true. So we do schedule downtime for when we're together, but it's super useful because we'll put in when one of us is going to be visiting the other one. And then because I've become close with his group of friends in Portland and because his group of friends and my group of friends in San Francisco are one and the same, we do tend to have a lot of things scheduled in. When you're both having different conversations with different people, there's a lot of opportunity to double book and then get annoyed with each other about things. So one thing that and you are so much better about this than I am. Actually, just yesterday, he was like, tell me all the plans that you've made so I can put them in the calendar. And I was like, okay. But actually doing something like that has been so helpful for keeping track of how much time are we spending with other people? How much time are we spending just by ourselves? How much downtime are we having? You know, family versus friends, your friends versus my friends, all that kind of stuff. I actually highly recommend a shared calendar for long distance couples.
Yeah. I think my biggest takeaway is like, I feel like a lot of times you're like, you have a very defined end goal in mind. And a lot of times with long distance, you're like, what's the opportunity cost? Like, is this going to keep going forever? And I'm never actually going to end up being with this person. You're so focused on the future. And I think you guys were pretty much focused on the present. You're like, I enjoy talking to this person. I enjoy being with them when I can. If I can't be with them for 3 months, that's fine too. But I think also some of it was where you were in life. So I think it sounded like both of you were kind of okay with this because you were working on yourselves, dealing with your own stuff. So I think it really comes down to like, if you can have a long distance relationship, some of it's like your own internal factors too. Like if you're the type of person that's like, I want to be with my partner every day, have children, get married, live in the same city, whatever it is, like maybe that's not for you. But if you're someone that can be more like
exploratory,
go with the flow, see where it is, take the moment, enjoy each other, then you guys seem just as close as any other couple that spends,
if not closer.
Exactly.
Because you spend all that time naked talking.
No, it's when I do the koala bear driving a semi-truck that really...
Oh, that's a good one.
That seals the deal. My last takeaway is like, there's no right way to do a relationship. Like everyone, I think like David said this, it's like what works for you and your partner. And that could be what works for you and it might not be what works for you. But as long as you two, it works on your terms, that's all that really matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no formula for a long distance relationship because there's no formula for a non-long distance relationship.
Yeah.
Yep.
Trial and error.
Sorry, anyone who thought they were going to get the formula for a successful
No, I thought
we got it. We got it.
Secret formula.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You're
And
right.
the fucking
Silver
mentality.
The fucking mentality.
Yeah.
Two of the biggest takeaways. Anything else? Any last parting words of advice for anyone who's entering into a long distance relationship or thinking about it? What would you tell them?
I would say try to get something out of the frustration of being apart. Like try to have that be personally meaningful. I certainly found it to be for me. That like I was doing creative things with it and I was driving conversations with friends and it was encouraging me to be romantic towards Sammi and it's gonna probably suck sometimes. So like, what are you gonna get in trade for that? You know? And not only did I get, Sammi in trade for it, but I also like had some personal stuff where it was like, oh yeah, I'm actually learning here. It can't just suck or you'll bail out.
That's like such a good point. If you're sitting there like being like, when are we going to talk? When are we going to talk? Like you're going to drive yourself crazy and be unsatisfied by the relationship.
Yeah. Maximize your time, whether together or not. Yeah.
I think the biggest learning for me, and this definitely isn't specific to a long distance relationship, but I think our distance is what emphasized this, is just really being willing to compromise with someone because you love and care about them. Our differences in communication style, although this might not be evident because we're both just like super verbose, loud individuals, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, David's a much more open person who wants to communicate about things all of the time, and he wants to talk about his feelings, and he wants to talk about how we communicate things to each other, which are all very important topics. I am not that type of person naturally, and I tend to see a lot more value in silence and action and sort of nonverbal ways of communicating and becoming close to people. And we've both done a lot of compromising to meet somewhere in the middle. And I don't think that that's unique to being long distance, but I think our distance has really brought that out in a big way. And I'm really grateful that that's a lesson that I've been able to learn through that experience.
That's really great.
Love it. Cool. Well, you guys who are entering into long distance relationships, I think this is a great relationship to learn from.
Even if you're not, I think this is
that's
a great
true.
relationship
That's true.
to
To me, a long distance relationship is from like Nob Hill to the Mission. Like that's a long distance relationship.
Definitely.
Oakland, I can't even. That's just
crossing bridges.
That's basically London and Portland to me. I need a
minus
passport
the time zone. Yeah.
How do we deal with the time zone to Oakland? I don't know how to do this. We're always learning from each other as well, even though you guys are still learning as you go along, but we're learning from you two. Thank you for sharing your journey. If we're all of our listeners, if you're going through something similar or something very opposite, here's my wish list. I want to hear from you if you've been in a long distance relationship for 5 years or more. I want to hear from you.
Or one that didn't go well.
Failed long distance relationship. I also want to hear from you if you've been in a long distance relationship where you've never met each other in real life. I know those exist. I want to hear from you too. Cool. All right, let's wrap this up. Thank you guys so much again for telling your story. This is wonderful. And last but not least, stay dateable.
Your action item for this week is to recognize that relationships come in all different types. There's no one right way to do it. So if you find yourself in a situation that may seem unconventional or not exactly how you pictured it, instead of dismissing it, try to figure out the craziest, wildest, most out-of-the-box way to make it work, and then scale it back to reality from there. You know, they say, if there's a will, there's a way. There's no impossible when all parties involved are up for the challenge. Want to continue the conversation? First, tag us in any post with #StayDateable. Then head on over to our website, dateablepodcast.com. There you'll find all the episodes as well as articles, videos, and our coaching services with vetted industry experts. You can also find our premium Why series, where we dissect, analyze, and offer solutions to some of the most common dating conundrums. To connect with us, find Dateable Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're also downloadable on Spotify, iTunes, and other podcast platforms. Your feedback is valuable to us, so don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. And most importantly, remember to stay dateable.